Is it working now? Can you hear me? Okay. Quick introduction to rockets and scramjets, and then we move on to talk about the projects that we have here at the center. So, starting with something simple, the concept of propulsion is to convert some stored energy into some sort of mechanical energy that gets you from one point to another. So the simplest case, you can imagine this balloon that you inflate, and then you are storing some energy in the walls, in the elastic walls of the balloon. So then when you release the balloon and the mouth is open, then this energy, elastic energy on the walls, is converted into mechanical energy of the gases of the air that's going out. And using Newton's third law, you have action-reaction, so the balloon is moving in the opposite direction, contrary to the gas expelled. So the rocket is based on the same principle, but instead of using the elastic energy that you store on the walls, you use some chemical energy, which is much more powerful because you can concentrate that in a small amount of matter. So the idea is to use oxidizer and fuel. So fuel stores the energy, and then when it enters in contact with the oxidizer at the proper conditions of pressure and temperature, then the chemical reactions are produced, and then you have the same idea of gases going out of a nozzle, in this case, and then your rocket and the vehicle that it propels go in the opposite direction. So if we have a closer look at this example from the Super Shuttle, you see here at the bottom you see the nozzle, so you have to be careful with the design that you do. Instead of the mouth of the balloon that goes all over the place, you design your nozzle carefully so that you can manage your directionality. So I was saying that in the case of the Super Shuttle, what you see is that on top of the vehicle you have to carry a lot of fuel. So all these tanks that you see in the back are just fuel and oxidizers to propel the space shuttle. And if you look at the orange container, the orange tank, at the top you have a lot of liquid oxygen, and then you have liquid hydrogen at the bottom. But you may think, okay, there is a lot of oxygen in the atmosphere, so why do I have to carry all the oxygen with me? It's like, why do I have to pay for gas and oxygen to my gas company if I want to only use the gas, because I have plenty of oxygen in my house to heat and to cook. So in the atmosphere it happens the same. We have plenty of oxygen that we might use instead of having to carry it along with us. Now when we get to space, it's a different story. We need to carry also the oxygen, because there is not enough oxygen in space. But if we just want to access space, then we can use some other means of propulsion that are a bit smarter in using the oxygen that we have available in the atmosphere. So this is the next step, which is going to what's called air-breathing propulsion systems. And here I'm taking a lot of stuff from Wikipedia, so all these diagrams you can find in Wikipedia. But on the left, you see different propulsion systems that are based on breathing air from the atmosphere. So at the top, you have the classical turbofan, which is the most widely used today in commercial aviation, such as the airplane that you have here on the top right. And then at the bottom of the left figure, you have two different concepts, the ramjet and the scramjet. The only difference between the two is that SC goes for supersonic combustion. So ramjet and scramjet share the same kind of design in terms of non-moving parts, as opposed to the turbofan that's rotating, as you have seen in the airplanes. So scramjets and ramjets, they have fixed geometry, and the concept for all of them is the same. You want to compress the air, then you want to release the energy, in this case chemical energy, in the combustion part, and then you want to do the expansion similar to what we had in the balloon, so that you can use the action-reaction principle and then move forward. And the only difference, as I said, between ramjets and scramjets is that in the scramjets, the combustion stage is supersonic, which poses a lot of challenges because most of the times you end up having combustion outside of the engine, which is not what you want, because then all the energy and transfer of momentum that you can get is happening too far away from your vehicle. So you want the combustion to happen always in that red area, the combustion chamber. And this is one of the challenges that the designers of scramjets are facing, how to do that optimally. Another one of the complications that arise when you design scramjet is what I put here at the bottom. It's called the unstart phenomenon. So what that means is that in the yellow area, you have a buildup of pressure, and this buildup of pressure is propagating forward in the vehicle, in the engine. And that's going to stall the engine, like what happens in a car when you stall the car. And that's very risky for the operation of a scramjet, because then you don't know for sure if you can start it again. So one of the main complications is this unstart phenomenon, and this is one of the priorities in the projects that we have here at the center, to try to define the margins of unstart for a safe operation of a scramjet. And as opposed to the turbofan, which is very well tested and we fly with it every day, the ramjets and scramjets are not so well tested, so we are in the design phases, even though they were proposed quite a few decades ago in the last century. But we are still facing these challenges to do a robust design. And on the bottom right figure, you can see some experimental vehicles, in this case the X-43 from NASA, and I will be talking about different experiments that have been done with these kind of scramjets. But they usually last for, let's say, 20 seconds of operation, so it's not that we can fly an airplane or another vehicle with those. And the idea is to use these scramjets to access space in a more optimal way, so to get us from the ground to the upper limit of the atmosphere in a much more efficient way. Then there is other concerns about the duration of this flight compared to the duration of the flight with the rocket, which is much faster to get you to space. So there is other considerations that have to be accounted for. This is just a comparison between the performance of energy, of engines in terms of propulsion. So if we zoom in, we have on the lower end here between the Mach numbers of 0 and 2. Mach number is just the ratio between your velocity, your speed, and the speed of sound. So if you go beyond Mach 1, that means that you're flying supersonic. If you're going below 1, that's subsonic flight. So most of the flights that we are used to is subsonic in the commercial aviation, and then you have jet fighters flying supersonic and other kind of devices flying supersonic. And the scramjet and ramjet are meant to go much higher velocities. So, for example, here in scramjet, you see the operation begins at Mach 6 or 5.5, and it goes upward. So that's what's called hypersonic flight, really high speeds. And this is what gets you from New York to Tokyo in very little time, or something that you can use to access space. So this is the motivation for developing this kind of engine. So now that brings me to the PISA project. This is the so-called Predictive Science Academic Alliance program, and it's a 5-year program. It's about to finish. We started in 2008, and it runs for 5 years, and it's funded by the Department of Energy, as you can see here, the National Nuclear Security Administration. And it involves a lot of people. I don't know if you realize, this is a poster that I prepared a few months ago. At the top you have the list of authors below the title, so it's quite an effort from many people, including people in experiments, simulations, theoretical developments. It's a large group of people working on this project. So the basic idea is to, as I said before, to help design this kind of scramjets by defining the margins of uncertainty and the bounds of the operation with respect to the unstart. So you want to say, if I'm here in the operation range of the scramjet, how far can I push so that I'm still safe operating the system and it's not going to unstart? And to do that, we use different techniques of uncertainty quantification, and basically we combine a lot of elements in this project. Going from experiments, as you can see on the left here, for example, the combined effect experiment or the STLI-UQ experiment. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail about all these experiments, but just to give you an overview of the full system. And then on the top left, you see the high fidelity simulations. And this is where the HPC component enters the picture. So this is why yesterday we were telling you about the simulations that we do in Sequoia and the new cluster in Lawrence Riverboard, or also here at the local clusters we do simulations that are able to inform the lower fidelity simulations of our system to do this robust design. And then we bring this uncertainty quantification, both considering aleatory uncertainties and epistemic uncertainties in the models that we are developing, to end up with a full system characterization of the scramjet, which is the end goal. And finally, on the bottom right, you see the high fire, which is something that we have decided to do on top of the original target of the project, which is a predictive simulation of a new scramjet system, which is different from the high-shot experiment that you see in the middle, which was flown in 2002 by the Australian team. So this is a summary of the experiments that are happening both at Stanford and also in DLR in Germany. So all of them have to do with some kind of supersonic flow. And some of them are at the component level, some of them are at the full level, trying to replicate the actual flight test that happened in Australia. So again, you see shock tubes, you see Anstar phenomenon, you see the ground test of high shot in DLR Germany, you see the boundary layer and shock turbulence interaction. So we have a variety of experiments. And these are used in combination with the high-fidelity simulations to validate the models. So in terms of the computational effort, we have, as we said yesterday, two different codes used here. Joe code is the RANS solver, which is low fidelity. So you can run many, many simulations more cheaply than with the Charles X code, which is the high-fidelity simulator. But we need both, and actually high-performance computing is mostly used for high-fidelity simulations, although we can also use it for uncertainty quantification, running many, many small simulations and then combining all the results together. And finally, the uncertainty quantification component, there is a lot of development being done here at the center on devising and implementing methods for a proper characterization of the uncertainties that you have in your system. Both aleatory, which means that those are quantities that you don't know how to properly account for in terms of, for example, perturbations to the geometry, that you don't know how to characterize the geometry of your engine to some tolerance, or inflow conditions. Sometimes you fly at this Mach speed, or sometimes you fly at a much higher velocity. And then there is also epistemic uncertainties, which have to do with the efficiencies of the model assumptions. So that's the overall picture of the project here at Stanford. And now I'm going to show you a couple of movies that show what we are doing in terms of high fidelity simulations. So let's see if I can find the one. Explain along the movie what you see. This is the rocket that propels the high shot scramjet into the higher part of the atmosphere. So once it gets ready for operation, this is the view of the engine. And we have different subcomponent elements from the full system. So I'm gonna talk about each one of the subsystem simulations that you see here. And these are run by many different people. For example, this one was run by Tarane and Curtis, two students of Professor Moines. And this is about the boundary layer transition from laminar to turbulent. And this is a very important fundamental research that can characterize how the transition is occurring in the run of the scramjet that you just saw. So this is a really large simulation, and what you see here is as we move downstream, you can think of this as as a river, but instead of water, you have air. So you have a wall at the bottom, and the flow is going, in this case, to the left, as you see it here. So you are developing turbulence. You started from something laminar, which is very, very smooth, and then you develop the turbulent state. So you see all these eddies interacting with each other. Then we get to the isolator component, which is the initial part of the scramjet, and there is this shock train happening. The shock train is a series of shock waves that are meant to set the flow in the conditions optimal for the combustion part. So here you see in almost light blue, those are the shocks. And now we're going to do 1, 2, 3 different shocks. So whenever you cross a shock like that, you are increasing your pressure in the isolators. And this is getting ready the air for the combustion part. This is another view of the interaction between shocks and turbulence. So here you have the boundary layer that you saw before. It has been developed into the fully turbulent regime. And now you see it interacting with the oblique shock coming from the top. And you see what happens to the eddies that we saw before. So turbulence gets amplified, and also the thickness of this boundary near the wall is now larger. So we are doing fundamental studies on what happens to these interactions, which is very important to set up this flow in the proper conditions for combustion. This was run by Bermejo-Moreno, one of Professor Lele's students, who also ran the shock train simulation that you saw before. Now we are at the combustion stage. So what you see here is a mixing layer with fuel and oxidizer. And in the middle, there is the reaction happening. So this is a fundamental study by Amilesa Zagafian and Professor Heinz Pitsch. And the idea is to do validation of the combustion models that we use in the high-fidelity simulation. So you see different fields here, the density, the strain rate, and so on, of what happens in this mixing layer. Mixing is a very important component of the scramjet because you need to mix as quick as possible. That's why we want the flow to be turbulent, because turbulence enhances mixing. And then I told you before that you want the combustion to happen inside the engine, not outside. So mixing is the most important part, so that you will get the fuel and the oxidizer mixed and ready for combustion. And this is what happens in the combustor. This is simulating one of the experiments here at Stanford. The simulation was done by Bermejo-Moreno and Johan Larsson, and the experiment was done by Mirko Gamba, who is now at the University of Michigan. But he was with us during the duration of his life. So what you see here is a jet, and it's introduced into the incoming airflow, and the airflow is going from left to right, and the jet is introduced perpendicular to the airflow. So you see, this is just a single snapshot at the given time, and you see what happens with the jet, how it spreads, and different quantities. And this is the full combustion. This is a simulation done by Johan Larsson, who is now a professor at the University of Maryland, and he was with us until last November. So what you see is the 4 different injectors of the scramjet and different fields, so temperature, pressure, velocity, and Schlieren imaging, which is telling you about the shockwave structure. And you can see the unsteadiness of this flow, how it develops as you move downstream, and how the jet is also changing the temperature. And you can see that this system is very long, and the reason for that is because, as I said before, you want the combustion to happen inside, just before the expansion at the end. So that's why you have to make these systems so long. And these are the credits, as I was saying before. Boundary layer was done by Terania and Purvis. Shock train by Bermejo-Moreno. Also the shock turbulence interaction with the boundary layer by Bermejo-Moreno. And now you see the combustion by Amilesa and the LES of the Stanford combustor by Ronald Becklin, and finally the LES of the high-shock combustor by Johan Larsson. And you will see now that there is, as I said before, a lot of people working on this. So it's not just the simulation part. You have then many more people working in experiments and in theory. And let's see, I have one last movie. Let's see the time. Yeah, I think we have in these 3 minutes. It's another movie about the fundamental aspects of shock turbulence interaction. So as I said before, this is important. This interaction is important at all levels of the experiment. So it happens in the isolator when you want to put the flow in the conditions optimal for combustion, and it happens later on when you are in the combustion stage. So this is a movie we presented last year, no, 2 years ago actually, at the supercomputing conference. And this is the simulation run by Johan Larsson, and I did the post-processing of the simulation, so I'll be showing you also what we are doing. And this is one fundamental study. So it is meant to inform us about how to model this process, and we try to make a story out of it. So this is what happens. Imagine that you have the shock sitting there, stationary in time, in the statistical sense, and there is turbulence coming now from in front of the screen. So this turbulence is modifying the shock structure. It's making it corrugate and ondulate. And as you can see here, there is even holes in the structure, which is one of the surprising findings of this research. So you can see also the intensity of the interaction is changing when turbulence is affecting the shock in one way or the opposite. So bringing the shock more downstream or more upstream. Now this is what happens now to the turbulence itself. So all these eddies that are going downstream, you see there is the interaction on the right when it changes color. And basically what happens is that the turbulence is getting amplified. So when you cross the shock, this turbulence is amplified by the effect of the shock. So the eddies are getting stretched in one of the directions and compressed in the other. So you have the interactions going both ways. Turbulence is affecting the shock wave, and the shock wave is affecting the turbulence. And what we did later is to study each one of these individual structures, each eddy. What happens when you cross the shock individually? So that's coming up next in the video. This is the kind of simulation, by the way, that we can run now at much higher resolutions in the Sequoia system. So this is the evolution in time of the vortex structures as you go from the initial isotropic turbulence, and then you cross the shock, which is here represented by that gray zone. So you see that the average vorticity on the surface is largely increased, and then you have the visible decay as you move downstream. And it happens the same for parallel vortex to the shock, and also for perpendicular vortex. And this is what happens to 3 different particles, fluid particles, that are going to cross the shock at the same precise time, but they are going to cross it in different parts of the shock. So the red one is crossing it at the high intensity region. The green one is in a weak intensity region, and the blue one is going to a shock hole. So there is no shock locally in that part. So you can see here that the red one is winning the race. It's the fastest, but they cross at the same time. So the velocity is higher in the red one, and also that there is a jump in the